Welcome everyone to this webinar on network design in supply chain. So I have Sachin here with me. Unfortunately, Ashish could not join today, but Sachin will be more than capable of providing us with a lot of interesting insights from his experience. If you have to leave for some reason, don't worry, it's recorded. You will get the recording afterwards. So don't feel obliged to stay if you have any other obligations. You will be able to see it nonetheless. So first, very briefly, I will mention the agenda. So I will give a brief introduction to Sachin's background, so you get to know him a little bit, and then we will go into the panel discussion. It will now be more a chat between Sachin and myself. We have three key categories, three key topics that we want to cover. One is really about what is network design, when to use it. Then it's a bit more technical. What kind of things do you need? What kind of data do you need? And tools do you need to make it work? And what kind of models can you use and how to do that? And then it's more about practicalities, like how do you make it work? How do you make a successful project? What typically fails? And these elements. There's time for Q&A in the end, for sure. So if you have any questions, you can just put them in the Q&A section. I will either direct them to Sachin in the end, or if they are relevant during a certain topic, I will mention them at that moment as well. So with that, I'd like to welcome Sachin. Sachin has been involved in different roles across companies, across Accenture, Amazon, currently at ExxonMobil, a lot of experience in planning and in optimization. So current role is as a business process manager in supply chain network design. So thank you very much, Sachin, for being here with us.
Thank you, Ben.
And then, like I mentioned, Ashish cannot join, unfortunately. But if anybody has any questions for him afterwards, that's of course that's fine, and we can redirect those as well. So with that, let's go straight into the discussion. Starting a bit, Sachin, with let's begin with what is network design. You know, what do you define as network design? Let's start with that.
Sure. So network design is kind of a exercise that organizations do to solve problems related to their footprint. So this footprint can be linked to their manufacturing footprint. It can be linked to their distribution footprint. If there are specific set of supply chain that the companies are operating, it can even be linked to the stores or the last mile footprint. So, right, whenever you kind of have to take decisions with respect to changes in the footprint, it can be relocation, it can be consolidation, it can be opening of new stores, new warehouses, new production manufacturing facility. So in order to take these decisions, you need to take it with the help of there need to be some science behind taking this decision. And network design is nothing but a science which helps business take this decision more accurately, more precisely, and through some data driven approach. That's mostly the network design function is all about. Um, in simple terms, yeah.
So in that sense, is it then always about strategic questions, about very high level questions for a business, or can it be also more at a practical level?
Sure. It actually depends on the tools which are available or the practices which organizations such are actually capable of doing both from strategic to tactical versus operational. So typically strategic objectives are more in terms of mergers and acquisitions or divestments, right? So when organizations went through this journey of divestments or mergers and acquisition, that's when they want to take a high level decision in terms of what are the expected synergies that they want to take from this strategic decisions, right? That's when network design can act as a key enabler for the businesses to help take these decisions, right? Strategic decisions can also be in terms of opening up a new plant, right? So whenever you want to open a new plant, you want to determine what should be the capacity of that plant, what capabilities needs to be added in those plants, right? What should be the customers that should be linked or served from the warehouses linked to that plant, right? So whenever we talk about investments or an outlook of 3 to 5 years from now, that are mostly the strategic answers that we get with the help of network design model.
Yeah.
Saying that
Okay.
it is not only linked to the strategic, it can even be drilled down or uh, disaggregated to the levels of tactical and operational, right? So the very interesting topic in these days is tariffs, right? So whenever
Mhm.
organizations want to take decisions in terms of understanding what impacts tariff will have on their supply chains, they generally use network design practice to understand how they can mitigate this risk by sourcing from alternate geographies or
Yeah.
producing in a plants where the tariff impact is lesser. So it can be strategic, it can be tactical, and even the operational use cases like determining the transportation routes, as simple as that. The organizations which are not on transport management system or advanced application, or even fleet sizing, right? Determining what should be the fleet that we should operate
Mhm.
with. Even these kind of operational questions can be ordered with the help of network design
Okay.
applications.
Okay. And earlier, I think it was it's more than a year ago already. I did a webinar also on supply planning and optimization. So optimization, um, how do you see optimization and network design? Do you see one as part of the other? How do you think about that?
Uh, so network design is typically an optimization problem, right? Because generally when you try to solve the problem, you want to either look at improving the service that the
Mhm.
business offers to the customers, or it can be improvement in cost cost saving initiatives or identifying initiatives which can save some cost for the company, right? So these are typically optimization problems, mostly mixed integer linear programming problems where you get an answer of you have some binary variables like whether you want to keep warehouse open or shut, whether you want to do it for one set of products or another set of products, and you have some
Mhm.
continuous variables in the form of cost and capacities.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, clear. So basically, optimization is used to solve the
Yeah,
network design questions. It's a method
correct.
to come to the okay. And a bit coming back to the structure that we have here, you say on a strategic level, it's in case of M&A, it's in case of divestments, or it can happen every few years, those kind of exercises. On a more tactical level, you have, like you mentioned, you have the tariffs, for instance, that you might also come to revisit a couple of months if they change, which they do
Yeah,
these days. And then you have also transport routes, transport modes, which are on a more operational level that can also regularly be changed based on these exercises. That's
correct.
quite clear. There's a couple of examples. Like from a business perspective, the kind of question that comes, who typically comes with these questions? In the case of an M&A and divestment, or in case of that, those
Mhm.
tariffs, does it come from finance? Does it come from within supply chain? Where do you see this question originating?
Uh, Typically, it comes from the. I think there are multiple channels to get these questions answered. Sometimes it comes in terms of M&As and the divestments. It is basically a top-down approach where
Mm-hmm.
uh, either the chief commercial officers or the head of businesses typically request the supply chain network design team to evaluate these scenarios so that the promised synergies to the shareholders can be kind of looked up in detail, right? Whereas the tactical and operational questions are more coming from the supply chain directors of the regions to see how they can make their supply chains more robust and resilient to the
Mm-hmm.
challenges that they are facing or gonna face in the short term.
Yeah.
Having said that, within the company, what we also do is a benchmarking thing where we continuously benchmark the different metrics between the regions, between the business units, and try
Mm-hmm.
to deep dive to understand the rationale and the reasoning behind it, right? So uh, mostly it is top down, but then we as a team within the company also take this initiative of identifying something which we can take it
Yeah.
to the business and say that this is something which we can also try to solve with the help of network
Okay.
design approach.
Okay. Okay. So the question can come from different levels, from high level, from supply chain level, and then also you do benchmark studies across the company
Correct.
and give. Okay, clear. In terms of the link with planning, and we
Mhm.
will come to tools and systems next. So I don't want to cover that yet, but the link with planning, if we speak about, you already mentioned it, if there is a transport management system in place, or if a company already has a module for distribution planning or for inventory optimization across their different locations. How does that relate to the network design? Because you're thinking about where should we do a relocation or where should we open a new location? But at the same time, people are planning on a daily basis across those
Yeah.
locations. So what's the link there between network design and planning?
Sure. So I think in simple terms, the output of network design needs to be consumed by the planning teams, right? So
Okay.
network design results typically leads to the consolidation of inventory, right? So when you operate with lesser locations, the cycle stock in the inventory in the network will remain same, but then
Okay.
typically the safety stock element will come down because then you operate with lesser locations instead of more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a one-time benefit that happens typically with the consolidation projects. But with this change in topology needs to be communicated to the planning team members, right? So
Yeah.
that they can plan their demand, they can plan their supply and capacities accordingly. So
Yeah.
the output of network design acts as an input to the planning team members to kind of do their
Okay.
short-term
That's
and mid-term planning. Yeah.
That's quite clear indeed. I think, and my question then is it also vice versa, where a planning team notices that they often run out of capacity, for instance. So they
Hmm.
come with the question, and that then translates into a network design exercise. Do you see that happening also?
I think absolutely right. You touched upon Ben. So right, especially when you say that your warehouse is already operating at 85, 90% during the normal period, and then when you
Mm-hmm.
anticipate that during the peak you are going to need an additional warehouse capacity, right? And to cater to these problems, since the demand is evolving, your customer base is evolving, and you are in the process where warehouses are running full, that also gives a good starting point to relook at your network to see should we look for additional capacities in the same region, or you should be very open minded and look
Mm-hmm.
for capacities and even far off, right? Because over a period of time your demand patterns, your customer profile, product portfolios keep on evolving. So
Indeed.
that also acts as an input to the network study.
Okay. So it's two-way
Two way, yeah.
in that sense, the link with it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, quite clear. So then in that case, I would like to move more towards let's say, more details into what does it mean to do a network design exercise project? What do you have to consider? The optimization approaches, you have the linear programming, you have the mixed integer linear programming, but what does that mean day to day? How do you do this? It's a very broad question, eh? So maybe
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
too broad, tell me that, please. But can you give some explanations to that?
Sure. So most of the network design problems are MILPs or mixed integer linear programming problems, right? Because
Mhm.
uh, when you develop a model, you try to get multiple answers with the help of a developed model, right? So it has binary inputs in terms of whether you should keep the warehouse open or closed, whether should you keep the plant open and closed, and so on, right? It also has continuous variables in terms of the cost, in terms of the different elements, and so on. By default, majority of the network design problems are MILPs, until and
Okay.
unless we typically have flow optimizations where we want to just optimize the route, or avoid the triangular shipments and ship it directly to the customers. Those are the only cases where it is linear programming problem.
Okay. And so in those cases of MILP, what kind of inputs do you need? You mentioned binary, you mentioned continuous ones. Maybe we can take a, a concrete example if you want,
Sure,
of the
sure.
ones that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So I think most of the network design projects are quite data intensive, right? So which means there is a lot
Hmm.
of data which goes in the network design approach or in the network modeling to say. uh, it has all the granularities of data, right? So it has some master data elements in terms of your customer locations, the locations of your warehouses, the locations of your plants. In case you also looking beyond your internal supply chain, like your suppliers or suppliers, then also you
Mm-hmm.
need to have the details about them, right? Then it also needs a master data about your product attributes, whether what is your product master looks like, which should be the materials in scope,
Yeah.
and more details around the product attributes, like especially coming from a paints industry, whether it is white or colored, whether it is
Yeah.
opaque or solvent borne versus water borne, and so on and so forth, right? Then you also need a lot of costing related data, right? Because cost
Mm-hmm.
act as a key driver in taking these decisions, right? So you need your transportation cost, which is like your cost between your depots or manufacturing plant to your factories, or factories to your warehouses, and then from warehouses to the customers. So you need
Mm-hmm.
costing data for all of that. You also need to derive, sometimes if it is not available, the cost of production, because that will act as a key driver when you want to compare a production cost of a same material in one plant versus another, right? You also need to have this production cost split it between what is the fixed component and what is the variability in that, right? So something like rentals, overheads, electricity is mostly fixed, but the
Yeah.
amount of labor is dependent on the volume that you produce, right? So you need to split it depending on all these variabilities. And
Mm-hmm.
so is with the warehousing cost, right? So again, warehousing cost, you want to model it fixed, variable, depending on how you set up. So it's a completely data driven exercise where you need inputs from finance, validation from finance on all these costing elements. You need validation from planning on the planning elements, and
Yeah. A
commercials
lot
on
of.
the demand from the futuristic element. So
You can keep
a very
going.
long
You can keep
answer.
going on.
Yeah,
Yes, you can keep
it's
going on input. It's quite a lot because from my side, I'm more involved in a pure planning project. I'm not involved in pure network design exercises, and there it's
Mhm.
already sometimes a struggle to get the right information. And I
Correct.
see a question in chat, which I will also actually come to in just a bit. But first, I want to touch on that, like that data collection process and having to make assumptions in some cases as well. How do you see that? To what extent are you able to collect all of this data in a good way? Who
Mhm.
gets involved in that process? How long does it typically take?
So data collection is the most time consuming activity to
Yeah.
say, right? And so if data collection and baseline is nothing but setting up the actual supply chain in some digital tool or template, right?
Mm-hmm.
That generally takes 60 to 65% of the effort and time. In so
Okay.
that's mostly the slow aspect of the work. And once you have a baseline, then the interesting piece of running the scenarios, comparing the scenarios starts, right? So
Okay.
that's how I will put it in terms of the amount of efforts on that.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting though. And do you have any kind of tips for that data preparation process? I see someone's asking also about kind of tools, which we'll come to in just a bit. But in terms of the process itself, within that data collection, interaction with other departments, for instance, from where do you get the data?
Okay, so I think it also depends on how you want, how your organization is kind of structured, right? So what we do is we typically appoint one point of contact from the different functions, right? Like planning, logistics, finance, customer service, and so on. And then these kind of person act as a representative in terms of helping us with the data. And whenever we don't have a complete data, they kind of act as a validation partners for signing of the numbers that we kind of derive using certain approaches.
Okay.
Uh, in case the organizations are mature enough, they have TMS systems in place, capturing the data becomes relatively easier. If that's
Mhm.
not the case, then it's a matter of going through multiple spreadsheets and getting what we want actually looking for. Right? So
Okay. So best case. other systems that are already set up from where you can get it. Otherwise, get people involved, which might come also with some struggles probably.
Yeah,
And if that's not there, then you have to work with some assumptions and
correct, correct.
okay, okay, clear. And what's the kind of that's a question from the chat which I like about the kind of limitation of parameters that you can use within tools or within an exercise.
Um,
It's a very broad question because how do you define parameters, right? But you can define it yourself however you wish.
Sure. So I think in terms of the parameters, it depends on the maturity of the tool that we use in terms of for our network design purpose, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there are multiple off-the-shelf tools available in the market which can be used for network design, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it can range from a very complicated network design application which is linked to a planning application like O9s and OMPs or Kinaxis, whereas there are a lot of off-the-shelf tools like Coupa, Ames, Optilogic, which are purposely designed with a key capability of network design, but then
Yeah,
not denying that they don't have a planning, but then network design is what they claim as their
yeah.
core competency, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I think most of these best-in-class tools have these features and functionalities where majority of the parameters can be considered, like uh, so 99% of the network design problems can be catered with the help of the features and the functionalities available in this tool. There can be some scenarios where it is not readily available, so we'll have to work out a solution to kind of make it happen in the tool,
Yeah.
but functionality wise they are almost there.
Okay. So in terms of, you mentioned there's some that are indeed more from the planning domain that then also extend into network design, and some that really focus on this network design optimization problems.
Yeah.
Are there any kind of tools that anybody can use out there, like more open source or free tools that you know of?
So I know of one tool called Optilogic. So which means that anyone can go to that tools page, create a account for themselves, and they can use evaluation
Mm-hmm.
licenses for their own purposes, right? It's limited in terms of the number of products that you can put it, number of customers, but
Yeah,
then you will definitely get a flavor of how the tool looks like and what features and functionalities it comes with.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of tools to use for that data collection, data transformation in some cases, was also some of the questions in the chat. Do you just use like Excel, like an Alteryx, like Python for those kind of things? Or do you also do that within the tool itself already?
So I think Alteryx is something which we were using it. I think one more purpose is to use it for data collection is like whether we want to make a digital twin, which means whether we want to keep the model live and use it 3 months, 6 months, 1 year down the line and use it for repetitive purpose, or
Mm-hmm.
should we want to do it as a one-off exercise to solve the problem that we have in hand, right? So because automation spending time on using these tools also take some amount of efforts and bandwidth. In case there are problems that we want to revisit on a certain cadence, then I think using tools like Alteryx, Kmine definitely makes sense. In fact, we
Mm-hmm.
were using Alteryx for the data preparation in our organization. However, we decide to use Databricks, which
Okay.
is available in the Azure environment. And right now we are using Alteryx for data preparation, data cleansing, transformation
Okay.
for our purposes, right? Um,
Okay.
uh,
So,
the tools, I'll take a minute. The tools which I was mentioning, right, which are the off-the-shelf network design tools, they
mhm,
also have the data preparator, which means that they have plugins which can connect with your SAP systems, multiple data sources, and then all the data transformations can happen within the tool itself. So
mhm,
that's again a function and a feature that can be explored in case the company wants to take that route as well.
mhm. Okay. So in case it's more of a let's say one-off project or something, then you wouldn't necessarily use an Alteryx or something else where you can create a data transformation pipeline for operative
Yeah,
use. You would just do it more one-off. But then you say that within those tools itself, they can also collect the data from other systems. They often have interfaces for that to
yeah.
pull them and to even get them in some sort of right format. Okay. And in terms of the kind of business questions and the kind of problems that we're trying to solve, which we discussed earlier, like the M&A, like the tariffs, like the transport modes, these kind of cases, to what extent is there support or already information knowledge available within those tools to answer those questions specifically with templates or things like this? Do you have to, can you use that, or do you have to start from scratch to create your actual equations, to create your model?
No, I think the standard problems are pretty much there, already baked in, right? So if it is linked to cost optimization or if it is linked to service level improvements, it is already there, right? The only place where you need to do a bit of customization is where you want to solve multiple objective problems, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you want lead time not to be impacted, but you also want your cost to go down, right? So
Yeah.
something like that. When you have multi-objective problems that you want to solve, that needs a bit of customization depending on
Okay.
your specific use cases.
Okay. What are there any other struggles, hurdles that you come across within these tools? It can be about the data collection,
Mhm.
the data transformation, or about the actual modeling or getting the outputs. Or do you have any ideas for tools on what they can improve? Just your own input, your own feedback, basically.
So I think one thing is I think it again depends on what are the features and functionality in a tool, right? But in some tools, uh, whenever you use transportation cost, right, it is available
Mhm.
only on the lanes where you are right now operating, right? So you use
Okay.
some simulations to derive for the lanes where you are not operational, right? But
Mhm.
then in case you have something like that available in the tool itself, right? So making that happen, or getting, because then we use some of again another tools to estimate the cost, uh,
Yeah.
in and feed that in into this network models. So
Mhm.
if that kind of features and functionalities are available in the tool itself, right, then would be much
Yeah.
more convenient and easy to use.
Okay. So about getting access to other data, basically, than the one that you
E-
put in yourself directly.
yeah.
Okay, very clear. So then I would like to come to the third final category before we look at some of the other Q&A questions. And this is more about, okay, what makes projects work? What makes them fail? How do you track the benefits? How do you do the handoffs? These kind of things. So
Mhm.
maybe first beginning with the kind of steps in a project. You already mentioned the data collection part that takes up to 65% of a project. But how do you see these different phases? Do you see it as different phases, like I asked, or do you see it as a continuous part? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So we see as a step by step process, right? So we typically start with a project charter, right? Identifying what are the objectives that we want to achieve from the study, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do a soft kickoff with the stakeholders that we want to be working closely with, right? We
Yeah.
establish certain governance like having a steering committee at regular milestones, then a core
Mm-hmm.
team working regularly, interacting on a weekly basis to reassess and assess how we are progressing towards the milestone.
Yeah.
That's having said that, that's mostly a governance aspect of it, right? So in terms
Okay.
of the phases, how we define is data collection, data validation as a block one. Then it is more in terms of creating a baseline, which is like uh, replica of the actual supply chain in any of the tools that we wish to use. Then we move to a scenario phase, right, where we kind of run multiple scenarios depending on the business requirements. And the last is kind of results come validation phase where we kind of share the results, reports, and close it off,
Mm-hmm.
right? These are only the blocks from the network model perspective, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
typically network studies needs to be translated to the business benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of moving to an implementation phase. So that's
Yeah.
that's the later phases that follows in after the network design projects.
Okay. To what extent are you still involved in that then?
I think our team is pretty much involved, right? So, what we do is the recommendations that we share with the regions or the business, right? Once we share the results and recommendations, they act more as a implementation partner for us. But then that's where we take a backstage and act mostly in the background of it, which
Mm-hmm.
means that within the company we follow a stage gate process to see whether we are on track. Are we missing anything? Are we
Yeah.
anticipating any risk if we plan to take it, right? So we also have some rule books, playbooks developed to avoid the pitfalls that typically happen in a project, and then we act as a gatekeepers during that process. We are not heavily engaged, but then we are always in the back of it, ensuring that proper mechanisms and governance is being followed during that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, clear. So essentially, you have the initial, let's say, scope, KPI, stakeholder governance as first step. Then you have the data collection, data validation as a
Yeah.
second step. Then you move into the actual scenario creation and modeling. And then as a fourth step, you look more at the results, the validation, and then in translation to the business and providing support in the actual rollout. Now, before those steps, if you look at which projects are you going to work on, is that something where you also have some input on, or no, it's just given from the business? Look, this is what we're going to work on. We have calculated some sort of business case, or we have prioritized this, and this comes to you, and you have to now work on this. How does that first stage work, which is more like from a business priority perspective, right? It's quite
Yeah. So I think we work with multiple businesses within the company, right? So
yeah.
with the operations director, we have, I mean, twice a year intake mechanism where we connect with them to
Okay.
understand their business priorities and then translate that to how those priorities means for us as a team. So
Okay.
that's mostly the approach, and then we try to ensure that whatever is the high impact projects, we pick up those first, and then we move to the uh,
Mhm.
kind of projects which are second in line to those, right?
Yeah. Okay. And in that sense, within an organization, in what you've seen, but also elsewhere, where do you see that the network design team usually sits? I mean, in this case, of course, we're talking network design and supply chain, but there
Mhm.
might be other kinds. So how does that relate to the hierarchy within the company? Can you share something on that?
Uh, so is it mostly like why the projects are stuck or stranded? Is
No,
that?
not why they're stuck. It's more within the company itself. So you mentioned you get the intake from the operations director twice a
Yeah.
year. You work for them with those kind of questions. In some companies, is it more, or could it be also linked somehow to the people from finance who are looking at bottlenecks and who want to make certain investments? Is that
Yeah.
also something, or?
Yes, definitely. So I think we also get some intakes from different teams which are not linked to this, right? So
Okay.
let's say if we have to work on a sourcing study to identify from where we should source these products, right? Should we
Hmm.
have a centralized sourcing partner versus regionalized sourcing, right? In those
Yeah.
cases, the requirement can also come from procurement team members or finance partners to ensure that we kind of run these projects for them. uh,
Okay.
yeah, it depends uh, upon the way company is structured and
Hmm.
from which all lenses we are trying to solve the problems, right?
Okay. Then I do want to come to the point of where do projects get stuck? Where do you see that? Stuck, as in, or it takes much longer to get to the next stage. That's all. That's stuck. It doesn't have to fail completely, but where do you see the most difficulties?
I think data is definitely a biggest challenge, right? Like when the companies have kind of grown by mergers and acquisitions, and then the different plants within the company sits across different SAP instances to say, right? So definitely ensuring that we have a right data available and having that
Hmm.
data validated, right? This becomes the critical time of a project where we end up spending a lot of time on it, right? The
Okay.
common pitfalls to say is sometimes we get into a phase where we kind of start purely looking from the data perspective and getting it executed, right? But then sometimes when we fail to speak to commercial colleagues, right, or listen from the commercial angle, that's when also there is a bit of kind of tussle, right? So they also have certain lead time requirements that they want to maintain. They also have some customer SLAs which they have kind of promised to their customers, right? They also reassess their competition within the region and province. So understanding commercial aspects also makes it significantly easier. So whenever we develop the scenarios, we consider these as a critical input during our scenario modeling.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking not only from the cost angle, thinking what we can deliver as an overall
Yeah.
value makes so much more sense.
Okay. So the data part is a difficult one, and then making sure that you basically cover also the objectives and concerns from a commercial aspect. Otherwise, it will be pushed back upon by some department, by some people, right?
Correct, correct. Because
Okay.
let's say if we purely talk about supply chain, we'll say we'll not need this location from a supply chain perspective, but then
Mm-hmm.
commercial will have its own point of view of having that location that may lead to certain different
Mm-hmm.
conversations. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that relates a lot to the handoff, basically, and towards the
Correct.
execution and some of the gaps it relates to. So after that has been done, or if it's, let's say, come to the end of that project, you've done the handover and the implementation happens, then to what extent do you look back at the benefits, if it actually made sense with what you originally scoped, and do you often see that as quite reasonable, or do you see often gaps there between reality and what was originally expected?
Sure. So what we do is we kind of track two or three different aspects, right? What is the modeled savings or the modeled recommended savings, right? So when we suggest something purely as an output of the tool, what is the savings that
Mm-hmm.
we got, right? Then what we arrive to as implementable savings, because then certain things are practically difficult to implement, which is more theoretical. If we kind of exclude those, what is the implementable savings? And
Mm-hmm.
once we have a savings that is kind of aligned with the different stakeholders, we kind of lock it into the system to ensure that that's our target that we want to achieve for a period of next 12 months or so, right? And with the help of different reports, mechanisms, financial partners, we track it month over month to see that what we kind of committed is actually landing it in our PNL. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
way we kind of ensure that the complete feedback look of what we kind of promised is actually landing it in our financial records.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Great. Sachin, we've covered quite some topics. Are there any that you think we've missed or that you still want to cover? Otherwise, I will move on to the Q&A. But I'll first give you the chance to to share any other things that you want to share. Are you good?
No, I think we covered most of the
Okay.
topics that typically happens in a network study. Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Then we will now move on to the Q&A. So I already mentioned that there was a question during which I already covered. Let me check if there's other questions. There's a question here from a person. Let me check. I'm currently so this is basically a person who's right now in planning, who's interested in network design. So how to move from planning to network design. And I don't know more context about their organization. So maybe I'll rephrase it to what kind of skills are needed to be involved in network design, whether you come from planning or not. Let's take both scenarios.
Sure. So I think it's a mix of a supply chain analytics and a business kind of a role, right? You need to have a good understanding about the supply chain uh, terminologies, concepts, and the way supply chain operates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Familiarity with the data and analytics tools is really helpful because you need to crunch a lot of data since this being a data intensive exercise. right? And I think getting trained on the network design tool is not so difficult aspect of the role, right? So in case the basics are clear in terms of supply chain understanding, business understanding, ability to translate the data into actionable insights, the learning tool is not so difficult aspect of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Another question here is whether network design is usually then more for enterprise, for big companies, or if it's something that you've seen smaller organizations also use.
uh, Predominantly being used by the larger organizations, right? But having said that, it is not only limited to big conglomerates or the big industries, right? Even the companies which are in their growth phase can use it to scale their supply chain in a better manner, because then
Mhm.
they will, with the help of some science behind these decisions, right, they will be able to take much more accurate decisions rather than purely relying through their personal insights. So this will definitely act as a key decision driver while making those decisions, right?
Okay. But overall, for a to elaborate on the question, overall for a small company, the benefits, the pure cost benefits will be less, right? And the tools
Yeah.
still have their cost, and the modeling and the data collection still takes the time that it will take. So the business case is by definition less. Is that right to say, or?
Yeah, then I think if for the growing companies or the smaller companies, it would not be viable to use a sophisticated application,
Mm-hmm.
right? They can use this application only for a specific period of time, let's say 2 months, 3 months, something like that. Or in case they have a resource who is good in operations research, they can use some optimization platforms like Gurobi or Ames to do it by themselves rather than using the application, which is much
Mm-hmm.
more cost intensive. The basic modeling can even be framed in Excel, right? So if that cost is a limitation, the basic Excel solvers can also help in landing solutions to the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. There's a question relating to the digital twin that you mentioned. The question is about to what extent is a digital twin different from just a model? I think it's about a question of maybe the buzzword of digital twin, or how do you look at that?
Uh, So actually, it's a buzzword, right? Depends on how it has different meanings in different contexts, right? So manufacturing, it is more of having their exact replica of their machineries into the system, right? From a network design perspective, and what I interpret is having a model which you can regularly update periodically, so that you are
Mhm.
able to take certain decisions, drive certain outcomes as an outcome of that model, right? If you
Yeah.
have that, then it's a digital twin purely from a
Okay.
network design perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you see the digital twin, the twin part as being continuous rather than just
Yeah.
a one-off model, basically. Okay. It's a fair one, I think. And that's a question from my end, not something that I see in the chat or the Q&A, but the whole part on AI. Do you
Mhm.
see any use cases there or any changes within network design, or it's a lot of buzzwords and not really much changes within your environment?
So I think uh, now we have reached a stage where it is going beyond the buzzword, right? So
Okay.
purely in the simple English language, there are certain tools available in the market where you don't need to develop 10 different scenarios, right? You just write it in a pure English sentence, and then the LLMs will kind of develop the model replica in that shape and format.
And does it
That's
work
purely
well? Because if you ask some questions purely text, it does not always capture it well, right? But in that case,
exactly.
you see that being accurate, or?
Yeah, exactly. That's when I was coming it. Having said that,
Okay,
we
sorry.
haven't tested it by ourselves within
Okay.
our company, right? So we are still using the traditional way of network design. Yeah.
Okay. So you see the potential for it, and but
Yeah.
it's not accurate enough. It's not fully working yet.
Yeah.
So it's at
Still in
that
development.
in
Yeah.
between
Develop.
point, tipping points, possibly. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, clear. I see also there are some questions in the chat part. Let me see those. Uh, these are more regarding Yeah, specific industries also. I mean, within retail versus within public sectors, government departments. I think the use cases are very similar. No, is there
Similar,
anything
right?
specific
Yes.
to those? I don't. Yeah.
I
Okay.
think depends on how the supply chains are structured, right? But then the use cases can land up in any of the departments, right? So I think in the government departments we used once in my previous engagement because then Amazon wanted to leverage the extensive network of postal department in India to ship deliveries in the
Okay.
interiors of India, right? So that's when whenever we were getting these locations where we are not there, we were kind of checking if the postal codes or post offices are available in the vicinity to kind of cater to those
Okay.
regions. So yeah, the application is kind of can be looked after across sectors and
Yeah.
industries.
Okay. Clear. I have one final question here in the Q&A that's open. Check that one. This one is about resources, any kind of training resources that you have or would recommend. So I assume books, courses online.
Yeah, I think the tool that we use Ames, they also have Ames University, right? So basically you can log in, create an account by
Is it tool
yourself.
specific then, or is it also
It's a
just?
tool specific, right?
Oh,
But then
okay. So it's
most
not
of the concepts are tool
similar.
agnostic.
Okay.
So when if you learn one, picking up another tool is not a challenge, right? So
Yeah.
there is an Ames University. It's available free of cost for sign up. The training tutorials are available. They have a community, and
You
then
promote them very
the
well.
yeah. Mm, mm,
No, that's good. Okay, people can look into that one.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. I think we've answered the questions in the chat as well as the Q&A. So I'll give it, let's say 20 more seconds for any people to put any last question if they want. But Sachin, I will already thank you because I found it at least very interesting. Without Ashish, I'm sure you covered everything very well from my perspective. If people still have any questions afterwards, are they allowed to contact you through LinkedIn or something? Are you fine with that?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
always connect and discuss. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'll give it a few more seconds to see if anybody still has any final question. Okay, seems like we've covered everything. So with that, Sachin, once again, thank you very much for taking time for sharing your insights. I do see a question coming in, but we can tackle that afterwards. We don't have to tackle that one right now. So thank you, Sachin. Thank you very much to the audience. Thank you for your time, for your questions. And as Sachin mentioned, if you still have any questions, you can reach out to him. I'm sure you can also reach out to Ashish as well, or to me if you wish. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day
Thank
or a
you,
nice
Ben.
evening.
Thanks for having
Bye,
me, and
Sachin.
thank you everyone for joining. Thanks a lot. Bye
Bye.
bye.